Awesome. Hey, everyone. How's it going? I'll give it
Hey,
about
Jeremy.
30 seconds and then we'll actually get started. But, take your time, join the call, get settled. I see a few folks are starting to trickle into the lobby. Awesome. And if you've joined us for a few months ago or for the last few Uptycs lives, you might notice a different look and feel. We don't have a PowerPoint this time. We're going to do more of a roundtable discussion. We have two really fantastic guests I'm really excited for. One who is brand new to Uptycs Live, one who has been on a couple months ago and is now returning. Jack and Tyson, I'm really excited to have you guys on. A wealth of experience and a wealth of enthusiasm also. Why don't you guys take a moment to introduce yourself? Jack, go ahead.
All right, I'm Jack Charles Rodig. Been working in the industry since I was like 15. I worked with the world's first B2C internet data privacy company. So I've been kind of privacy obsessed my entire life. And I've had a career that's been fairly unique. So I've always been doing security, but I've also picked up other hats, DevOps, various teams like production engineering and IT, teams that kind of typically butt heads. And it's given me a unique perspective on the way things are run. So, I started my career young, dot-com bubble burst, went to beauty school for a little bit, left beauty school, then we came back out of there and started working at some companies, was a CISO for a long time, was a security practitioner. And it's a job that burns you out. A lot of people don't realize that CISOs are under an incredible amount of pressure. And so I wanted to make a change and take a risk. And when somebody contacted me about Uptycs, I didn't realize that Uptycs had been doing something very interesting in the XDR space that I was personally obsessed about, given my uniquely diverse background. And when I heard about Uptycs, I was approached, about an evangelist position, and I said, "This isn't a decision that I get to make, right? It's like it was something where I felt like this is just who I am, So I joined the team, and I'm working on spreading the good news."
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to kind of dig into that a little more. Tyson, why don't you take a moment, reintroduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, I'm head of product marketing here at Uptycs. I've been here 2 years. Super excited to talk about the topic today, agentless scanning.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Like I said, just to kind of set the tone for the rest of the webinar, we're going to be spending about 15 minutes with you guys doing this roundtable discussion, talking about agentless versus agent-based, kind of the best ways to use agentless, how it works in tandem with agent-based security as well, and just really what excites you about this area. Then after that 15 minutes, we'll move more into kind of the architecture side. Tyson will do a walkthrough of a few slides, keep it light, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, I just want to ask you, Jack, you just joined Uptycs a couple months ago. What really excites you about this space of agentless, and what really drew you in to the Uptycs platform?
So I was an advisor for Orca, one of the earlier advisors for Orca. And I absolutely love the product, the whole agentless idea. It's this very unique software that when I learned about it, it was simple, elegant, and it was able to X-ray vision into these machines that lack governance. So working in DevOps and working in security, a lot of security folks, a lot of my peers didn't understand that they didn't have full coverage with their XDR. The DevOps team would go deploy their agent, and then the security guys would be like, "All right, our agent's deployed." And the DevOps team was very used to not being able to deploy their tools on all machines because of prototype systems that existed that only developers had access to. Well, I was well aware of the deficit, and that deficit poses a huge risk. I've actually worked at companies that have been breached because of these ungoverned machines. So an agentless came out, a few years back. I deployed it, and I immediately validated that there were machines that were vulnerable to immediate compromise. And the whole agentless idea excited me because it takes care of this huge ignored area of risk in our cloud environments that were ungoverned and kind of promotes the idea of governance.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Tyson, I know you've talked a few times about this idea of, where your risk is kind of having this outsized impact from a smaller number of your unmanaged assets. Maybe you could touch on that for a little.
Yeah, and credit goes to Jack. In our conversations, he he brought up the point that even though these unmanaged assets may be small in number, but they represent the majority of the risk in terms of, you know, their configuration, their software patch status, or and so but the problem is that this is an unknown unknown, because you just don't have any data. So that's really the benefit of an agentless scan, because you're going to get 100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And one thing we want to touch on too is, you know, there is this aversion to agents sometimes. Why is that?
Okay.
I can. Yeah, you know, what I've heard is that, like, you know, DevOps or IT operations folks just have a severe allergic reaction to yet another agent on their systems. You know, agents can you know, perturb the applications and the systems that they're installed on. Oftentimes, if there's a slowdown or some type of issue, the first reaction or triage step will be, okay, let's turn off the agent and see if that solves the problem, you know, or the agents. So it's you know, unfortunately, I mean, been a big problem, you know, for a long time. Even now with technologies like eBPF that makes it more safe to instrument the Linux kernel, you know, we still struggle with these you know, perceptions. Yeah, Jack, I'll hand it over to you.
So that was a great explanation. Let me tell you the perspective from the DevOps team, you know, being that I had to wear these two conflicting hats. So I worked a lot on incident management and response, and being a DevOps and a security guy gave me a unique opportunity to do that, because typically incident response from a compliance perspective is owned by security, but the way that companies grow, it starts off being owned by the DevOps team. And the DevOps teams, a lot of the time, they are the ones getting woken up as the first line of defense. And I've been there with them. It's, you know, it can be fun at first. It's like, oh, cool, you know, I'm waking up at 2 a.m. to fix this problem. And then, you know, when it's Christmas or New Year's Eve, it's not as fun. So the DevOps team wants to keep the systems stable, and they want to keep them available. And they're interested in business continuity. And as we all know, business continuity is one of the core tenets of security, and especially data security, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing there. And agents tend to be terrible. In my personal experience, when an agent is written by a small development team, they can't test them across a huge variety of infrastructure services. So they may not have a CentOS, you know, 4 machine that's some legacy machine that they can test their agent on. And eBPF, phenomenal technology, right? It doesn't support older machines. And a lot of the time, mid-market companies that are older and still, you know, maintaining their hold, that could be half or more of their infrastructure. So in my experience, I've seen DevOps teams cut agents. Here's the problem. Once they deploy the agent, they might blame that agent for little problems here and there, and then there'll be something explosive happen. And one time we had a problem on one of my teams where an agent was going wild, consuming a ton of ports. I mean, it was making like 1 million connections per second or something insane. And the XDR company stepped up and actually logged in and worked on troubleshooting the issue. They found out it was an agent for a different application, and boom, we're fixed. 6 months later, after I told my team that I managed to redeploy that XDR agent, they hadn't fully deployed it. They hadn't deployed it for full coverage because they saw it as an opportunity to get rid of it. This is my own team, and these are well-intended people. They want the machines to be secure more than most at the company, right? Because they're this line of defense, but they're more concerned with the availability. And this is one of the many problems that I identified in XDR. Agents, right? And it's not just a problem with agents, it's a problem with the way agents are developed. Can cause problems. There are compatibility issues, and Uptycs kind of what was one of the things that I discovered they had solved in a unique way. allowing to have full coverage across a grand scope of things and versions of things.
No, that's great. And to dig in a little more, I'd love to kind of figure out the story behind how these different teams might derive value from agentless. There's this allergic reaction, Tyson called it, to agents. And, we read about the death of agents and the rise of agentless. But I'm curious, how do we quickly show value for these DevOps teams or an operations teams or a security team when there are trade-offs in telemetry, but there is this clear, useful path forward for agentless solutions? Jack, Tyson, either one of you, I'd love to hear.
So I can start on this one, Tyson, if you like. It's a very misunderstood area. So for some reason, agent-based XDRs, HIDs, whatever you want to call them, and agentless systems that scan essentially for vulnerability, they've been put by advertising campaigns as being these head-to-head competitors, which they're not at all. So an agentless system can just X-ray vision into everything. You have a cloud environment, and it has an asset list. So every single machine that's in there, you drop one line of code in there, and boom, you have a resting state vulnerability assessment of your entire infrastructure. That typically runs every 24 hours, though you can run ad hoc queries with some companies. But they're never real time, and they can't access the runtime of the machine. So, bring in agents, and agents can, I can think of one company in the past that was monitoring kernel system calls and storing those in a database, billions of rows, billions and billions for every day. It was amazing, but insustainable. And eventually they had to start cutting down the amount of data that they were storing, and they were no longer this amazing tool, right? So this is an interesting problem here, right? The agents can look at your runtime state. The agents can determine what's going on the machine in real time. So if you have a hacker doing things wrong, you can stop them in his tracks. Insider threats, stop them in their tracks. But also, if the system is just looking for anomalous system behavior, it can also track, out of control programs and that sort of thing. So it provides value to other teams as well. The agentless stuff, of course, can justify the need to have the agent-based stuff, because you can drop it in a cloud environment and say, look, there's risk on these machines. We need to get access to them so that we can install our agent. Or maybe it'll tell us which machines to install the agent on, because we'll find out which ones are more risky and we don't have the budget to install it ubiquitously.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Tyson. I know you've been working on this kind of balance of agentless versus agent-based. What have you found is a good balance and a good way to kind of use them together?
Yeah, I think it's Peter Drucker. He said something to the, excuse me for all the management nerds out there, but I think it's something like you can't manage what you can't measure, or something to that effect. And that's really true in security as well. You can't really make informed security decisions about security controls without being able to measure risk. So what the agentless solution will do is give you the data that you need to make those informed decisions. You can have the conversation with the rest of the stakeholders about, hey, this is empirical data. Now what are we going to do to mitigate the risk for these things? And so that's how I see agentless and agent-based solutions working together in tandem. Agentless will give you the data that you need to make the decisions, and sometimes the answer is going to be agent-based.
No, that's fantastic. And Jack, I know just based off of your CISO experience, I'm kind of curious, how do you see agentless fitting into a CISO's risk posture management going forward?
So this is an excellent question. It was a question that's been asked of me by, I think, 40 venture capital firms. It's been something I've explained many, many times, and it's still very hard for me to explain. So I like to do it by example. If you think of an agentless solution as the coup de grace of vulnerability management, right, or vulnerability detection, and also an agentless solution that can stitch together potential attack patterns. It tells you, like, it's like if you're looking at your house, Are your doors unlocked, right? Do you have buggy electronic door locks that people can crack into? Are those windows easy to break? What about your alarm system? Is there a bug in that I can access as a glitch, but it doesn't detect people in your home, right? It's not going to know if the alarm's going off. So one day, so throughout my career, I've been the CISO for probably hundreds of companies or over 100 companies, because I worked for conglomerates, and I would come in as their CISO, and it would be like a fractional CISO. And I've seen CTOs who are like, "What's this big XDR spend? This is expensive stuff." I mean, it should be. It collects a ton of data that can be used by a ton of. So I had this one experience with the CTO, and this is. Some of us get cynical on the job, right? And we never expect people to be like, "Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah, go for it." So I deployed an agentless system in the cloud. I loaded up a dashboard, and he saw all of the problems that existed on the machines that we weren't able to install agents in. I said, "That's why we need the XDR with agents." And he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, approved. Approve the budget." I gave up. I mean, I did a commercial for a company about like the symbiosis of agent and agent. And then I joined Uptycs, and they're doing both. Right after I joined, they dropped Agentless, and I'm like, it was exactly what I wanted to see. I've been advising other CEOs in this space. I've been advising them to do what Uptycs has done. Now, there's some other competitors have started to do it, right? But Uptycs got the XDR hardcore right. So they were poised, they were like positioned to be able to build agentless in a way that they could offer both with excellence.
No, that's fantastic. And I think a lot of what you're saying goes back to Tyson's point around how to use them together, and that symbiotic relationship of it's not either or. You want to use them both together. And just kind of being mindful of everyone's time, though, I do want to move on from the discussion and move on to the next portion of this talk. So Tyson, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll let you walk through the PowerPoint.
Awesome. Thank you.
Let me know if you can see.
All right, it's up.
Perfect.
Okay, so the next slide with the pie chart is talking to that concept that Jack introduced, that although numerically the minority, these unmanaged and rogue assets actually represent the vast majority of your security risk. So Agentless allows you to quantify and measure that risk. Whereas before, you didn't know. It was kind of like the unknown unknowns in your environment. Okay, next slide, please.
Oh, real quick, I have to comment on that.
Okay.
Go for it.
This is a concept that I try to explain to so many people, and I don't have the best way with words. I speak very technically sometimes. And you can see here on this chart, you've got the unmanaged and rogue assets, and there's just a few of them. There's this huge amount of risk. And I don't know, data visualization is not my thing. But when I first saw this chart here, maybe I'm a weird guy. I'm a weird guy. I'll confess. I started to get teary-eyed because I was like, it's like somebody could communicate this effect. It's like, this is a huge deal, right? When you have all these homogeneous clusters and you're deploying the agents on them, you're being misled into think that you're solving all these risk issues. And I remember we had thank gosh for this, we had this bug bounty hunter. Somebody had made a simple change, and this was a machine that we should have had the agent on it, considering it was configured so poorly. It was a Jenkins machine at a former company. That Jenkins machine had default login credentials. It had keys to access all of production. It had tons of configured jobs on it. And oops, somebody made it world accessible. They gave the world a UI to delete our company, right? I didn't know about it until the bug bounty person reported it, because it didn't have an agent installed on it, because the login and password, though they were default for the application, they weren't default on the server. So I've tried to explain this to so many people, and I wish that I had known Tyson earlier, because then I could have had this graph to like they clearly demonstrate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great concept. So the benefits of agentless workload scanning is that it's going to give you 100% coverage in your cloud environment. Basically anything that has an EBS volume attached to it, we're going to be able to take a snapshot and then scan that snapshot. It's all API driven. That means it's friction free. Uptycs has 2 deployment options for the agentless scanning. One of those is where we do the scan inside your environment. That means your data stays with you. Only API calls enter and only scan results leave your environment. And then, this whole issue of like versus shouldn't be a thing, because why not both? So Uptycs gives you the power of choice. You can use both, and we've been talking about how they work in conjunction. Next slide, please. So getting into the kind of the nitty gritty details of these 2 options that I talked about. What we're describing here in this diagram is the option where your data stays with you. We do the scanning inside your environment. So the scan will be requested, either a scheduled scan or on demand. We use the AWS APIs to take the snapshot of the block storage, create a new disk. We launch the scanning instance. Now, here's the kind of the funny thing is that our agentless solution workload. So we're using the agents on the scanning instance, and we'll do a scan of the block storage, and then the
Tyson, you
results.
cut out for a second for me right there. Could you just repeat back what's interesting about the Uptycs solution?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's an agentless solution, but we still use agents, just not on the production system. So we're using an agent on the scanning instance, and that's how we do the scan of the snapshot. And then the results are sent back to Uptycs, and then we'll detach and delete everything. Unless there's another scan pending, then we'll reuse the instance for the next scan. But this is the first option that is like the most privacy aware. and if you want an even simpler solution, we can do the scanning in our environment. That's like a true SaaS model.
No, that's awesome.
Next.
I think the way to think about the unique point that Tyson made, there's 2 kinds of agents, right? There's an agent that's running on your operating system, and it's very complex. And then the agent that is doing the orchestration of the snapshotting and the analysis of the snapshot, that agent is running on the infrastructure control plane, right? And the infrastructure control plane, of course, is on one of the major cloud providers. So they're very resilient, and there's not a lot of different versions of them that, if no one crashes their infrastructure control plane, I'm sure it has happened, but it's a much safer way of doing it. So, and I'll try to touch on this later, but not all agents are created equal.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
People may, sorry, my animals are attacking me. Then people may have questions, about the different types of what you get with agentless, what you get with agent-based. The main difference here is frequency. That's the first row. The agentless solution is going to be periodic. So you can imagine, a security guard walking the perimeter of a very large, environment, and he comes around to the same point like every 12 hours or every 24 hours. That's going to be the agentless solution. The agent-based solution is going to provide continuous real-time runtime security. So it's like a security camera. It's observing everything at where it's installed. And so that's going to give the security team the ability to go in and quickly answer live ad hoc queries, perform incident response and investigation, especially against historical data. Because the agent is continuous, it's capturing all of this observed behavior, even for systems that are no longer running. So say I want to go back, if I've been aware of an incident and I need to go back, look back like 2 weeks or 3 weeks at this particular system, even if it's no longer running, I can see exactly what happened at that time in very granular detail. So that's incident response investigation you're going to get with the agent-based solution. And then real-time behavioral threat detection. Uptycs has, over 1,200 behavioral rules mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And then with the Uptycs Protect add-on, you will have blocking and remediation capabilities. It's an add-on. Not everybody wants the agent to have write capability. So it's an optional thing. If you deploy the extra bits for Uptycs Protect, you can do blocking and remediation.
No, this is really helpful. And I like this breakdown because it helps clarify how agentless and agent-based can work in tandem. And, we talked in a few ways about how teams might be averse to installing agents on their systems, or might be inclined to have an agentless scan to get that X-ray vision. And for me, I like this because you can really break down and see and match up. You have these assets, you have these different types of servers or containers or different endpoint devices that you're trying to secure and manage, and you can really quickly understand where you might want them to fall under this agentless or agent-based categories. So you can kind of parse out these different asset categories within your system and start to, manage some of these previously unmanaged assets and have them work together. So I think this is really helpful for parsing that out and really breaking it down.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, though, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I want to be mindful of, Jack and Tyson's time as well. So first off, thank you so much for joining us. I've seen a couple questions already trickle in. One of the first things, though, Jack, you mentioned at the very end, it was just kind of that not all agents are created equal. I wanted to give you a moment just to expand on that and talk, and then I'll open it up to the couple questions that I've seen come in.
So this is a nuanced thing, and it was very pronounced when I was working with a company recently, a former gig. And we were one of the biggest customers, and we were trying to get them to create an agent that would have a lot of coverage, be stable, collect data in an efficient way, and collect a lot of data. And I remember very distinctly reading the kernel object code of their agent, right? And this company had built this amazing data infrastructure, and that's why I chose them at the time. But their agent-based solution, it had some compatibility issues. It was proprietary, and it's when you're inventing things that are so low level, that's pretty difficult to do. Though the people who engineered that software were excellent. So we convinced them, my team and I convinced them to go over to eBPF, which was the trend at the time. I believe CMD, which was acquired by Elastic, they were using eBPF. And tons of other people started to jump on the eBPF bandwagon. Well, I was running older infrastructure. eBPF wouldn't have worked on the kernel versions on half of my systems, and these were legacy systems that were very difficult to replace. So there's problem number one: compatibility. If you take a look at all the solutions out there, if you're looking for XDR, for example, ask about the compatibility. Make sure that it has full coverage. Make sure it's going to support your Windows machines, your Linux machines, your Mac OS machines, the different versions of Linux you have, right? It should be no surprise that there are very few things out there that do all of those well. Some of them have, small lightweight agents that collect a little data, or unstable agents that cause problems. But I don't think there are companies that have agents that perform as well as the agent that Uptycs uses. There are some other issues with agents in terms of the way that they collect data. I've seen some companies that have agents that run every 60 minutes. Now, that's not real-time data, right? If a hacker is coming into my machine and I have to wait 60 minutes before I see their next move, I'm not tracking them well enough, right? You could probably run an ad hoc scan with agentless every hour. So why would you want to do that, right? And then there are agents that are difficult to deploy. There are agents that consume tons of resources and are very unstable. Uptycs, one of the reasons I came here is because a lot of those problems are solved. And I believe that's because of the huge, tremendous contributions from the open source community. And if you look at the way that the Uptycs agent works, because it deploys on so many things, because it's so stable, it can kind of bring teams together. I ran DevOps, I ran Corp IT, I ran data science, all at the same time. Security being my primary focus as CISO. So I would have a DevOps team deploying one type of software. IT team's got another type of software. And the security team wants to deploy another type of software. When I first started using what was called HIDS at the time, I saw an opportunity. And that opportunity was to create a consolidated tool that would satisfy the needs of all those teams. And when I launched the tool, the first tool that I used, it was like revolutionary. I didn't have it deployed everywhere, but I had it deployed on several hundred nodes. I'd log into the console and I could see this granular data about what everybody was doing, configuration data, and it helped me get to know the company when I just started there as their CISO. So I'll log it onto the UI and I'll see, this guy keeps running sudo in a production environment. And so I'd ping him and I'd be like, hey, did you just run sudo on this machine? And he'd be like, how did you see that? And I'm not the type of CISO to blame and shame. I'm a very positive, focused one. But I was able to get to know people. I was able to encourage them to do things in a positive way, right? It was a game changer. My DevOps team loved it. We actually eventually saw this thing, my team and I, as something that would eventually displace the systems that like New Relic and traditional open source monitoring infrastructure that collect performance data. We saw it as something that could displace that. And bringing DevOps and security together with one tool, that can bring DevOps and security together with everything and make them work more collaboratively and improve security in a way that is psychological or an unintended plus, bonus, benefit.
No, that's fantastic. And it's funny you say it like that and mention that collaboration term, because one of the questions was actually going back to our earlier discussion at the beginning of the webinar, talking about, some of this maybe animosity between DevOps teams, security teams, operations teams. And the question was around asking you, Jack, how do you encourage collaboration? So I think you answered it brilliantly right there. Now I'm seeing another question come in. And Tyson, maybe you want to take this one, was about asking just for a little more practical guidance on using agentless and agent-based solutions together. So I'll let you answer that over the next couple of minutes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited that we have the agentless option, solution now. That for new customers, I would advise them to run the agentless scan first. That's going to give them the data that they need to start having these conversations, these data-driven conversations about how to mitigate the risks that they uncover. And hopefully it's not going to be a lot, but the eyes might open.
It will be.
Yeah.
And I think for your most critical assets, then you can have a conversation about deploying the continuous runtime security. It's that security camera that's always on, recording everything. That's going to give you the mitigate the risk for those high value assets.
That's so remarkably insightful. A lot of times, I'm very active in various groups. The ISLF is a nonprofit organization that I'm part of the steering committee for. And the ISLF is designed as a way to help younger or newer security leaders and encourage diversity in the security industry. In the ISLF, I've heard many times about people who can't deploy agent-based solutions because agent-based solutions are expensive because they're extremely powerful. And in my opinion, they're to a production infrastructure security program, an agent-based solution is probably the best thing that you can deploy, right? The absolute best. It does a ton for you, right? When you drop that agentless solution in first, it deploys like that. you pop a line in your cloud configuration, and it all gets sucked in, and it just starts working. Your DevOps team is going to be like, hey, I like this, and your executive team is not going to see any disruption. They're not going to see any complaints. They're not going to see this justification for a huge spend. And when you take the executive dashboard or the data to your CTO or your CIO, whomever you're working with, one of your peers, right, that you're going to need to get support from to get budget, it'll make them, realize that the value of an agent-based solution is very high. And so that sticker price that comes with a lot of agent-based solutions will suddenly not be so high. Now, I say this from past experiences, but I've seen the Uptycs pricing model, and it's not as shocking as I've seen with some of the previous companies I've used.
No, that's awesome. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So thank you so much, Jack. Thank you so much, Tyson, for joining us. I think I personally got a lot out of this discussion. Hopefully you did too. And I know for sure the audience did as well. Now, if any of your questions weren't answered or you just have any thoughts later, obviously we love talking about this stuff. Feel free to shoot me an email down below. Feel free to reach out to Tyson or Jack on LinkedIn. Like I said, we're passionate about the security industry. We're passionate about these topics. Come engage with us, come talk with us. And hopefully we'll see you next month as well. But thank you so much and have a great day.
All right.